Pass over to Lara, who's just going to give us a brief introduction about NCVO and Small Charities Week. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Natalie. And thank you so much for having me as well. It's really exciting to be here today at the very start of Small Charities Week. So my name is Lara Bundock. I work for NCVO, which stands for the National Council for Voluntary Organisations. Prior to this, I was the CEO of a small charity as well for about 12 years. So I know what it's like to run and operate a small charity, which is why I also loved stepping into the job that I have at NCVO, because my job is to oversee the practical support, particularly for small charities around the UK through the National Council for Voluntary Organisations. Just as a quick overview, we provide a help desk for charities. They don't have to be members. You can get in contact about any topic and we will respond and give you signposting and support. We have a webinar programme that's also kindly funded by City Bridge Trust. And many of those are going on this week. So Small Charity Week is an opportunity for people around the UK to really celebrate small charities, to try and amplify the voice of small charities, and also for there to be particular support that is available for small charities on this week. For those of you who haven't yet come across it, there is a Small Charities website, and that has got a whole list of events that are going on across this week. Most of them are free for people to be able to engage with and sign up to, and it covers a whole remit of different topics and different areas of support. Those are being hosted by multiple people around the country as well, so do take a look at that if you haven't had a chance to see it. In terms of NCVO, we have our own elements of support that we're doing across the week. So we are trying to profile the voice of small charities on Instagram and on all different kind of elements of social media. So be watching out for different stories from small charities. And we are also working with Parliament to talk about the benefit of small charities, to raise their voice, to look at what we can be doing more to help charities to move forwards. And then across this week, we have got various different webinars on, obviously we're taking part in this one this morning, which is exciting. And then later on this week, on Wednesday, we have one on good practice in terms of collaboration, so insight into how to work with corporates and how to work with local authorities effectively, which will be really exciting. And one on Thursday, which will be quite a sensitive one, but we are looking at how to communicate in the face of opposition or in the face of challenge when you might get pushback from members of the public on the topic that you are caring about, and how to manage that. It will be quite a sensitive webinar, but it's a really important discussion that we have. And we've also organised 96 different mentoring opportunities across this week, which has also been thanks to some of the support that we get from City Bridge Trust. NCVO usually has a membership for people, for charities that's free under 30,000, but for this month we've got it free for charities that turn over under 50,000. So if you're interested, please take a look on the website. But we are here to try and support you guys, and so please do get in contact with us. I'm sure I'll be talking a little bit more about that across the webinar.
Thank you, Lara. That was really helpful. And just quickly over to James, who's going to talk about City Bridge Foundation's Small Grants Programme.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Lara. It's really interesting. For those of you who aren't aware, our trustee at the City Bridge Foundation is a local authority. It's the City of London Corporation. So I may well tune into your webinar, Lara, about how to work effectively with local authorities. I'm sure it'd help us. All right, so hi everyone, good morning. I'm James. I normally look after all of our non-financial Funder Plus support, we call it, so everything that goes around a grant to help people. So small grants is not my area of expertise by any stretch of the imagination, but I will do my best to demonstrate to colleagues that I have been paying attention and that I do understand what we do in other parts of the organisation, which can be tricky. So I'm just going to say a few quick words about our small grants program. This will be familiar to many of you who are already funded by us, but I'm aware that some of you are not funded by City Bridge Foundation at the moment. So hopefully this will be a brief bit of helpful information. So our small grants program has a focus on 5 different funding areas. We prioritize looking at environmental greening and growing, working with older people, working with deaf and disabled people, working with the LGBTQIA+ community, and working with migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. And wherever possible, we are seeking to fund organizations and projects that actively involve the communities they serve when they're designing their services. So we talk a lot about being user-led. So we also seek to fund organizations and projects where the majority of the staff or the leaders of the organization have direct lived experience of the organization's area of work. We accept applications on a rolling basis for this program, so there's no cut-off deadline by which you have to put an application in. You can submit an application for funding at any time. And to be eligible for funding, you've got to have a turnover of under £200,000 a year. You can apply for up to 5 years of funding for a maximum of £20,000 a year. And that funding can either be project-based or it can be used for core funding. And by core funding, what I mean is it's not restricted to the delivery of a single project. If you're successful in your funding application for a small grant for our small grants program, you can also access the Bridge program and our Funder Plus offer, which I'm much more familiar with, and that can help you with additional non-financial support on top of your grant. So it's things like paying for training or access to consultancy and so forth. I think that is broadly everything I should be saying about our small grants program at this point. But I'm sure we can pop a link in the chat for people to have a look at the website for themselves, which will probably clarify anything that I've missed. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Our small grants lead would be proud. So without further ado, I will pass over, we'll just start our panel discussion and I'll let everybody kind of introduce themselves and talk a bit more about the work that they do and the organisations that they're from. So the first question that we'll be discussing is, what do you do and why do you do it? Nikki, I can see you first on my screen, so I'll go over to you first. Yes. Hello.
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, everyone. My name's Nikki Watson. I'm the founder and artistic director of CoDa Dance Company. We are a dance company that specialises in dance for neurology. We work with people with acquired brain injury, Parkinson's, stroke, and other lesser known neuro conditions. And we are disability and female led. We deliver participatory projects and also immersive interactive dance experiences. I'm going to keep it short because I think there's lots of other things that we'll be talking about soon that are quite relevant to who we are.
Thank you, Nikki. Myanah, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Myanah Saunders from Forest Gate Community Garden. Forest Gate is an area of East London between Stratford and Ilford, quite a deprived area, with very little community space. So back in 2012, we identified a space that could be used for community gardening, and we opened in 2016. We don't grow vegetables. This is very unusual for a community garden. And I just looked at our aims, and this is what we do. It's probably, let's just tell you what we do. We create and maintain green spaces for wildlife, plants, and people. We support enjoyment and learning about nature, and we promote an inclusive community and nurture well-being. Now, lots of gardening, of course, goes on, but it's mainly a social space, and it's grown enormously thanks to people who can do core funding for us. We have about over 2,000 visits from people every year. We run lots of events. We're in fact running with Jazanne workshops later in the year. So what this funding enables us to do is make all that happen. Okay.
Thank you so much. And Annie, would you like to?
Yeah, I'm from Jazanne Arts, and we are a small CIC, and we focus on working with older people, and we target different groups of older people. So we work with people who are living with dementias, and that can be right from mild to advanced dementias. We work with independent older people who are living on their own, and most of them have also experienced a recent bereavement. And we also work with Caribbean community. The other two directors are both from the Caribbean community. And we do 4 main areas of work. So one is we tour with a professional show, and we tour all across London, and we do singing, dancing, reminiscence, interaction. And all the shows are based on conversations that we've had with older people. And we work with them regularly in a day centre for people living with dementias. And that's more, we work totally person-centred. We work with the individuals there and create art with them. With our independent groups, it's very much about giving them a voice and giving them a chance to socialise with each other and be creative. So they create their own shows, which at the moment, one is looking at a murder mystery, and we're plotting terrible deaths. And the other one has just done one all about the cost of living crisis. And in fact, that was the one in Newham, all about the cost of living crisis and mental health and alcoholism. And it was really gritty. So we just do whatever they want. And the other area of work we do is intergenerational. So we work with older people and children together, and that's fantastic, enriching experience. And I'm just really interested in inclusion, bringing people together, and how the arts can transform lives, both through creativity, through social, being social together, reducing isolation and raising confidence, and all the things that will be happening with the other partners as well, with CoDa and Forest Gate Community Garden. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. James?
Oh, am I picking up next? Great, thank you. Sorry, it's such a really interesting wide range of stuff that happens. I'm particularly taken by the idea, Annie, that the cost of living work that you're doing comes out grittier and darker than planning an actual murder mystery. There we are.
It does, believe me.
Okay, so at City Bridge, we're funding a really wide range of organisations. We work with large organisations, we work with small organisations, and we are really taken by the idea that small organisations have something really important in terms of the role that they play across London. We wouldn't be having this event, we wouldn't be thinking so hard about our small grants programme if smaller organisations weren't important to us. And so I wanted to ask each of you, and Annie, fair warning, I'll be going in reverse order, so I'll start with you. I want to ask each of you about your take on what you think is the kind of unique role that small organisations play in London and the communities that you work with. So Annie, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think generally we're based in our communities. So we're there all the time. We don't fly in and out. So we really have quite a deep level of knowledge of the people that we work with. Because we're small, we can be really flexible. We can change as people's needs change, which they do all the time. We can really respond to exactly what they need and help to signpost them to other groups if necessary. I think we're generally very kind and caring. Because we know the individuals that we're working with, and that's really important to us. So people hopefully don't fall through any nets. We see them as a whole person. I know that we're a lifeline to individuals. They tell us that all the time. I'm sure it's exactly the same for the other companies here today. So that's really important. And I think we do raise quality of life, but also we can be a voice for people that find it difficult to have their voices heard. We can represent those people, and as things change for them, we can bring that out and make sure that it's a focus.
Absolutely. I mean, not to infer that larger organisations are not kind and caring, but yeah, definitely that kind of element of the personability and that immediate connection with someone comes through so strongly when we talk to people.
It's just easier, I think. If you're a small organisation, it's easier to be kind. Yeah.
Absolutely. Myanah, what do you think?
Well, Annie said it all. She's taken the script. Yes, I think particularly for us, we can be responsive very quickly, unlike big organisations. For example, we've got a steering group, which I shall talk about, I think, quite a lot later, that meets monthly, which is open to everybody in the community. but we focus obviously on managing the garden. And we've had somebody recently visit us, very complimentary about the garden, but very concerned that we're using plastic grass. Now, we didn't ever buy it, we've been given it. We thought we were doing a good thing because we were recycling it, it's convenient and safe. But she's brought to our attention the fact that it's actually giving off toxins. It's got an aspect that's actually dangerous, and a very small way, I think, but that we really shouldn't be using with small children around. And she emailed us about 10 days ago. So she's coming to our steering group meeting this Wednesday. Everybody's been circulated with her points. We shall discuss it. My guess is the outcome will be that we will phase it out gradually. So we've been able to be very quickly responsive to her to find a sort of compromise, really. We can't rip it all out straight away, but we can do it gradually. This is contrasted perhaps with some of our experiences with things like the local authority, where it can take you over a year to get some action done. That's the way we can respond very quickly.
That's great. That's a great example, Myanah. I had no idea about the toxins of plastic grass. You've educated me about that. But I think, more instructionally to the point, the ability for someone to just email you and then you're taking action on it straight away, within 10 days, you're talking to them, they're involved, they have a voice in what you're doing. So that's a really great example. Hey, Nikki, anything you would like to add to this?
I think something that I wanted to add is sort of maybe more personal to me, and maybe I know there's probably other organisations here that are kind of founder led as well. And I think when you're sort of small and you're founder led, you're kind of really driven by the reason that you launched the company in the first place. And so I think you don't get too lost in the bigger infrastructures that can happen, and very much like Annie and Myanah were saying, you can be responsive, and I feel like you're almost in that new business launch phase as well, where you're really able to respond to things quickly, you're able to make changes really easily. And I think the impact that then has on the wider community is big as well. I founded the company because my mum has MS, and it was my response to being able to deal with that. And I didn't know CoDa was going to be a charity, or it was going to grow, or anything like that. I just wanted to make a difference and to find a way to sort of heal myself and my direct family. And by doing that, you then have really deep and meaningful conversations with the community that you're serving. And I'm not saying that that's any different for larger organizations. I don't know, because I don't have a larger organization. We only started having core staff April last year. Before that, everybody was a freelancer, everybody worked part-time. So I think, your projects are smaller, they're much more embedded, and you can be really responsive to those communities in the moment. And every project that we've done has sort of been born out of the conversations that have happened on a previous project. So a lot of the time I say I don't know where one ends and the next one starts, because they do grow because of those conversations that you're having. And I think it just makes the work feel so meaningful, because it has come directly from the people that are impacted by what you're doing. And I think you're able to take really bold steps. Like, we were halfway through a project in making work, and we brought our lived experience consultants in as co-directors in the work. And I know that co-commissioning and all of that is quite buzzwordy at the moment, but partway through the project, they sort of said to us, well, and we had 15 artists working on this project, and we're designing this interactive experience, and it cost quite a substantial amount of money. It was our biggest project to date. And halfway through, they were like, it's not really hitting the mark. Obviously went home and cried first off. There's beautiful artistic work, and they were like, yeah, but not really. And we were able to just be like, okay, let's start again. What does it need to say? And to be able to be that responsive and genuinely have them co-directing the work to go, no, actually, that's not what we're saying. It needs to say more about this. We want people to look at us through softer eyes, but we want to tell the gritty stories, and we want to be brave enough to do that. And you're sort of being a bit woolly with it. So actually, no, that's not what we're saying. And to be able to just halfway through a project go, actually, yeah, let's tear that up and let's start again, felt really bold, actually. And I'm not sure if it was I don't know, I might be wrong, but I'm not sure if it was a much bigger organisation, if they would have just been able to go, right, okay, shall we? Let's start again. You know, and I think that comes from working in a small, really committed team, that you can make those bold decisions and sort of go to the trustees, we've done this thing, and for them to run with it. So yeah, I think it's just a really unique position to be in.
Yeah, I think your instinct's right about that ability to pivot quickly when you've got far fewer layers of bureaucracy. I think after we've finished the kind of formal questions, there's a really interesting point that we can pick up in the Q&A that I wanted to ask you about, Nikki, which is, you talked about this kind of beautiful, organic, kind of messy growth as a small organization, as a founder-led organization, and just like unpicking some of what you found challenging around that, because I'm sure lots of people on the call will be really interested in any insights you've got around trying to navigate that kind of beautiful, organic, messy growth. But yeah. Okay. Coming back to you, Nikki. So we're going to go in reverse. Actually, no, I'll go to Myanah next, because Myanah hasn't had a turn first. But kind of jumping on from what Nikki was talking about in terms of holding the voice of beneficiaries, kind of, right there at the core of what you're doing. Just a few thoughts from all of you, I guess, around why you think that beneficiary voice, that user voice, is so critical, so core to your work that you're doing as a small organization.
Yes, when I had a look at this question, but I thought, well, who are our beneficiaries? When we set up, we would have said, oh, our beneficiaries would be the people who come to the garden and use it. But in fact, as it evolved, a large part of our beneficiaries are our volunteers. They get a tremendous amount out of it as well. And they've grown and developed as the garden has developed. Of course, our visitors are important as well. And we do the usual, the way we listen to them, to people, is we do the usual things: feedback sheets, occasional surveys, a suggestion book. We talk to people, but our main channel is our steering group. This is held every month. It's open to anybody, and we advertise it quite widely. Although when I knew I was going to be talking about this, I asked people about it, and we clearly don't advertise it widely enough. We need to rethink that. We use conventional social media, we use flyers and that kind of thing, newsletters. And what this group does, it is in between. It doesn't have a formal role, it doesn't have a constitution as such. It evolved from the way we started, which I'll talk a little bit about. But it hears discusses what's been happening. It looks at future events. It gets reports from, we've got 3 very part-time, 1-day-a-week employee contractors. It gets reports from them. It can raise issues. Usually anything important obviously goes to the trustees. Some of the trustees come to the meeting anyway, so there's links there. It doesn't have a formal management role. The trustees obviously do the strategic stuff. And with hindsight, of course, you can see how things have developed at the time. As you said, it's a mishmash of organic growing here, going everywhere. And we started, there was a plan to have an enormous development in our small town centre, 27-storey block building. So there's a local campaign to stop it. And during that campaign, which was successful, probably not because of us, but of other things, we found this plot of derelict land very close to the main high street, owned by the council. So we approached them to say, could we have a community garden there? With 5 of us, would be a good idea. And to our horror, they said, you've got to consult the community. We thought, this is a bit of a cheek, you know, we know, we've got, and this was probably the best thing they ever did for us, because at a local festival, we asked everybody, we've got this space, do you think it's a good idea? We'd like to use it. In what way should we use it? We didn't have any clear ideas about how we were going to use it, except, and what people clearly wanted was social space. They didn't want a conventional community garden with, you know, 12 people owning raised beds and growing vegetables. The area is very short of green space, but it's the shortest in London of green space. And so that, in fact, formed the way the organisation actually emerged. Following that, a small group of us met in a cafe weekly to get it going. We held a big consultation meeting. 70 people came. Probably about 10 or 15 of those are still with us, and this is talking 10 years ago, on plans. You know, what kind of thing would you want? How should it be organised? Just general consultation. And then we started negotiating with the council, and that took a year. But those meetings went on. They went from weekly to fortnightly. And then that group has continued. It's been the one stable thing that's gone through. We made a mistake, first of all, being a CIO. So being a CIC, we should have been a charity. We changed to a charity. But that group has now met weekly for 10 years. And it enables people to have a voice and give us feedback. It's not perfect by any means. We haven't ever yet dealt with a big conflict. I hope we'll never have to. But it enables us to keep in touch with what people feel. One member, she comes to the garden occasionally, and she came up to somebody and said, Benjamin Zephaniah was a local resident for a while. He died last year. Could we celebrate his life in some way? So we said, come along to the steering group, put your ideas out. So she's done. We formed a small task group, and we're having a big celebration in August, which she's been running, really. So we've been responsive, really, to what people want. We tried to listen. Of course, you never do enough. You never do enough. But
no, that sounds great.
It works. It works.
Absolutely. How have you added people to the steering group over time?
As volunteers, when volunteers sign up, we say, we have a steering group, give information, we have a steering group come along. When I've asked people recently about it, most people are very positive. It feels like we're involved. It feels like we get to know other volunteers who we don't normally work with. We're part of decision making. But I asked about the disadvantages as well, and lots of people said it could get sort of cliquey. It's because people know each other. It might be difficult for people to join in the group if they're new people. I haven't noticed that happening, but it does tend to be a core of the same people. And somebody said maybe this is inevitable in small voluntary organisations. You get, you know, a small group of keen people, but we need to be aware of that, I think. And perhaps with new volunteers saying, you know, I'll meet you beforehand, I'll come along with you, and so that people feel they're still. Minutes go to everybody, and minutes are available to everybody. I'm not sure how many people we can.
I'd be really interested in picking that up in the chat and maybe in the Q&A as well, about any insights that anyone else has around trying to avoid that kind of cliqueiness that can happen, you know, that kind of core favoured small group, because it's a really dangerous thing, something to be live to when you're running a small organisation. Annie, what are your thoughts around sort of the importance of that beneficiary voice at the core of your work at Jazanne Arts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really is. And I just want to say that I visited the community garden quite recently, because Jazanne Arts are going to be working with the people that come to the community garden. And it's amazing. It's so imaginative that you've got doors, haven't you? I was thinking about lots of different stories about people coming through the different doors. There's loads and loads of doors that make up a fence, and there's a little kind of pond with frogs and lots of wonderful nooks and crannies. So it's an amazing space. So in terms of Jazanne's work, everything we do comes from our beneficiaries. So whether it's artistic, in terms of that they inform the content of what we do, like in our touring shows, it's all about their reminiscences and like oral history. and finding out what they think. And we actually use their words. So when you go back into do the show, they really recognize it, and they, oh yeah, that, you know, that everyone's different, but people have similar experiences as well. Even the way we phrase things, like there's one woman, she said about her relationship, oh, he was dishy, he was so gorgeous, and I says to myself, I have to have him. And when we do things like that in the show, and my partner's Caribbean, so she uses her kind of Jamaican accent when we do it, they really it really resonates with them. We had one show we did, there was a part where my baby dies. We kind of go back in time, my baby dies, and a couple of the sort of carers or the staff said, oh, you can't do that, that's really distressing. But when we'd done the interviews, the women had said, look, this happened to so many of us and we weren't allowed to talk about it. And we really want you to include this. Yes, it's sad, but we want our stories to be told, and this is really important. And the audience members were always fine with it. It was always the people that were kind of looking out for them or looking after them that were worried about that scene. So we kept it in. Then, as I said, for the independent groups, in terms of artistically, they decide what they're going to do, and whether we like it or not, they decide on what. And we do that through consensus, we do that through games, we do that through making sure that everyone has a chance to talk and tell their story. And sometimes it becomes very original because there's such, you know, diverse stories that come together. It makes the piece quite original. In terms of our work with people living with dementias, we always observe how they react to what we're doing and then adjust. So it's their voice through what they're doing, really. It might be through their movement or the way they react to something or don't react to something. And we try and find out about each individual that's in the group so that we can work with them and what will stimulate them. And then with the intergenerational groups, we always work with our older people first to find out what kind of themes they want to do, and then we'll go into the schools as well and make sure that the children are also interested in those themes. In terms of running the whole organisation, we also have a steering group / management committee, and they are mainly members of our groups. They're diverse older people mainly. We do have some other people that have come in to fill some gaps if we need some specific skills. They meet 4 times a year, but we see them every week and we ask them every week, look, we're thinking about this, what should we do? Or we'll call people up. So it's quite informal in some ways, so that, because sometimes in actual meetings people don't necessarily speak, whereas if you chat to them when they're ready, or they might just tell you something, and so we'll use that information as well. So yeah, so that's our main ways of finding their voices and using them in everything that we do.
That's great. I mean, I really like this idea that you can be in an appropriate and kind of safe way, but you can be risky, I guess, in some ways. You know, you don't have these kind of layers of bureaucracy that kind of make everything feel bland and boring. Again, not to infer anything negative about other organizations, but this is something that's really nice about being able to take those risks. It's really kind of like beautiful, bit dishy. It's nice. Okay, Nikki, your thoughts.
It's just really, I felt like I was a bit of a nodding dog there, like while Annie was chatting, just because our work is so similar in that we have the performance and the participatory project, and lived experience voice. It's runs through all of it. Like, that's why it exists, right? It exists because people have things that they want to say, and in particular, there's not a massive platform, or actually I don't know of any other platform beside us locally, that is giving those people a voice, you know. And something that someone said to us in the past was like, I'm just going to get this quote up because I always get it wrong, but I think it's like, it sort of sums it up. We shared the film that we'd made at a workshop, because we do like blended workshops that are part interactive, part audience. And one of the participants says, no one ever shows what it's truly like to have Parkinson's. this is what it's like for us, and pointed to the film. She said, I've never seen myself shown like that. And I actually got quite emotional and nudged my friend next to me and said, oh, bloody hell, that's us. That's what it's like for us. And I think that is such a core of what we do, is sometimes it is uncomfortable. And I really hear you, Annie. We always get carers being like, oh, should you be saying that? And it's like, well, this is real life. Like, and it can be very similar to having an organization. It can be messy and grimy and crunchy at times, but it can also be, you know, really beautiful and joyful. And, you know, you can still celebrate life by telling those really gritty stories as well. And I think that's what's really important. And, you know, from my perspective, from seeing my mum living with MS for so long, it can often feel that I have quite a negative perception. And that's why, you know, because I'm her daughter and I want her to be okay, and all of those things that goes with that. And that was why it was so important for me to get someone else's perspective. I brought lived experience voices in to broaden my mind of what I was feeling and what the projections that I was putting on, very similarly to Annie's carers, very similarly to a lot of the carers and clinicians that we work with. You know, we have this, oh no, you can't, no, don't do that. But actually, it's really important to tell those gritty stories, because then you do find the joy and the laughter that comes with all of that as well. And that's, you know, one of the things that our lived experience consultants tell us all the time, is that yes, there is darkness, but there's also a lot of light, and we've got the opportunity to show that in a really sensitive way, because it comes from them. Yeah. And I think, yeah, that's just been really, really important for us to do. And I think the more embedded you become within your community, then the easier it is to tell those stories in a way that is meaningful and that does connect with audiences. And we had someone say to us, I'm just going to find this other quote, because it was about what it's like to share that work with clinicians. And they said, I don't know if I'm going to find it. Bear with me, sorry, I just had it up a moment ago.
That's okay.
They basically said, oh, here it is. The staff know what people have been through medically. They know what you can and can't do physically, but emotionally they don't always really understand it. And this gives them the chance to get it more. And so I think, again, that ability to offer a platform for communication and to be the bridge between those communities of carer, clinician and lived experience, because often it's really, really hard to have those honest conversations and be like, this is what it's like to receive care, this is what it's like to give it, and often it is a bit crunchy.
Yeah.
And I think we as artists are able to find that platform that gives equity in a space, whether that's in a participatory session. Nobody gets to sit and watch our sessions. It's not, nobody's a goldfish in a bowl. If you're in that room, you're moving, and that can be moving your eyes, that can be breathing, whatever that is, that's still engaging. Nobody gets to sit and watch, because that then changes the equity in the space. And that's what we want to create, is this equity that allows those difficult conversations to happen. And I just think like that's massively, massively important to do.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, it's my turn to do nodding dog now. I really hear what you're saying, you know, that thing about having that really deep connection with an individual so that you can sort of talk about that whole person. And that's a really hard thing to do around disability as well, particularly, you know, I mean, like, so this isn't about us as City Bridge or us as a person, but, you know, just to mention briefly, I have a neurological condition. I use a wheelchair to get around, and like I hear loud and clear everything you're saying there about that realistic portrayal. And I think there's something really nice about that ability of a smaller organization to really know the people that you work with. Okay, great. Thank you. Natalie, I believe you've got some things you want to talk about now.
Yes, thank you, James. Just before I go on to the next question, I wonder, Lara, if you've got anything to add about kind of the unique role of small charities or the importance of beneficiary voices, having kind of run your own small charity in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I only to echo really what everybody else has said, and I don't want to take up too much time of the panelists, but the charity I ran worked with survivors of human trafficking, which is very much a voice that often isn't heard. And so it was really important. We also tried to find opportunities and ways to include beneficiaries within the board as well. And that was challenging, but really worthwhile. And those that we did end up recruiting to the board not only had their lived experience to offer, one of them was also a business manager and a business owner, and she brought that perspective as well. And that brought a real freshness to the board, to actually have somebody sitting within our board who had that experience, because it brings a higher level of accountability to your board to not sit separate as much from the direct day-to-day of what's happening. And I think it's challenging, but I think it's really important to do so. I think what everybody's come talked about, I think, is key, and I don't want to take up too much airspace, but essentially I agree. And I think where we can include people as much as possible throughout the entire organisation, it's really important.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. It's so important to have those diverse experiences and opinions on a board. Otherwise, it can be very hard to kind of suggest any changes or experience anything different. Amazing. So just the final question is, how can funders better support small organizations? And that can be kind of beyond funding support, but also in the processes for like applying for funding or during a grant. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about what we can do as funders to support you. We'll start with you, Nikki, and then go backwards.
Worries. There's a number of things, and I'm sure we all have really similar thoughts, but I think there's something around transparency and ease of application. I think that would be really, really supportive in the first instance, because most small organisations probably only have like a couple of members of staff, if that. And I hope that funders understand how much capacity goes into writing a grant. You know, most of us are not grant writers. Most of us are founders or artists, or and I think the volume of work that goes into an application, and often the value of feedback is not very good if you're unsuccessful. And I think there's also I think it would be good for funders to maybe look at an application and be like, well, actually, have you considered this, and support you to shape your application would be really helpful. I think often when we are maybe smaller or just starting out, we don't articulate what we do in the best way. Like, we're not very good at selling ourselves, let's be honest. I think is one of the probably things that we don't do fantastically. And I wonder, and I know that capacity is stretched for everyone, but I think there's something about conversation and building those relationships maybe before even an application goes in. So I think more networking events like this are really good. And I think that smaller organizations, I would just invite you all to just be bolder. I think we played it really safe in the first couple of years, and we were going for really small project grants and like trying to make budgets squeeze in and things cheaper, and just like, I would say, value yourself. Your service is incredible. Public health would not do what you do for the price that you do it for, so really, really value yourselves. Do ask for the right amount. I think on the reverse of that, funders, you could encourage smaller charities to actually ask for the right amount of money. If you think they're underselling themselves, encourage them to go for more. And interestingly, I don't know if anybody from City Bridge knows this, but actually one of the grants assessors very early on for us, we're getting towards the end of our grant, actually said, oh, you should really be going for multi-year funding. You shouldn't be going for this small project. Like, I would encourage you to ask for this over 3 years, not one. And I went, what? She was like, please do that. And I think, you know, like that bit of encouragement there then gave us the confidence to start going for other multi-year grants, and you know, and now we have a number of those, and that's fantastic. So I don't know if City Bridge knows that, but that was one of your early grants managers that done that. And so yeah, I would just encourage small charities to be bolder, ask for more, aim high, and then funders, if you can't fund the whole thing, come back and say, oh, actually, we really love that and we want to start a relationship, so here's £1,000 just to kickstart you, and we're going to start that relationship, because it's not a lot of money for you, but it's a huge like flag in the, you know, it's like an achievement sticker for us, like being able to put a decent funder at the bottom of your website is massive, because, you know, funds attract funds and enables you to build relationships. So I think, yeah, sorry, I could go on for ages, but please build relationships, big up your small charities, and small charities, make sure that you ask for more, value yourself, value your services. Yeah, don't undersell yourself.
That's great. I mean, gold star for that assessor, whoever it was, who encouraged you to go for multi-year funding, because that's exactly the sort of thing. Like, and it's so difficult, especially if you're not used to writing funding applications. And let's be honest, who is?
Yeah.
It's so difficult, and there's always that tendency to just, I'm going to ask for less because I think in my head it means I might have a bigger chance of getting the funding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all the wraparound activity that funders offer, like often, I think, again, this is just a little bit of advice, often we feel like, oh, it's a thing that we just don't have the time or the capacity, but actually so much of that wraparound activity in terms of confidence building, in terms of understanding better how to write bids, in terms of relationship building, you know, HR support, all of those things that none of us have, like, ask for it all, do all of it, because it just helps so much. So yeah, keep offering all that funder plus activity and go for it, do it all.
Thank you, Nikki. You're right. You never know something unless you ask. So you might as well just ask for more and then see what you get. And I think you'll get a gold star from James for shouting out our Funder Plus offer. Coming to you, Myanah, is there anything you'd like to add around funder support?
Just to say really that City Bridge Foundation have been a brilliant funder for us. They meet all the criteria, which is multi-year funding. We've got a plan. We know how long we've got funding for. We've now got extension for 2 years. We know we've got to plan. And you fund, like a few other places, National Lottery places, fund core funding. That's so important. How small funders or other funders, big funders, think you can just run on projects where you have to top slice everything. You spend hours doing that, writing the funding bid, working out, how you're going to cover your core costs, and then you don't get, the funding, and that's a real downer. City Bridge Foundation have been so responsive in terms of the extra cost of living grant, which I think was just amazing. Our staff were just so pleased to get it. I think the other thing funders need to do, and I know this is hard because there's a large amount of money, is trust the organisation, and we feel City Bridge Foundation have done that very much. Obviously, you've got to be careful. Things can go wrong, but it's light touch. We've got somebody we can contact, which is really good. Other organisations, we've just got a very big grant from a local authority. Now this is public money, and so it's much more stringent. We have to, for £20,000, we have to supply every receipt, every invoice and receipt. Now that's, the work that takes is just phenomenal. I think there must be better ways to do it than that. But City Bridge has trust. We feel they've trusted us. We lived up to that trust. The assessor visit, very useful. She highlighted some things that we need to do, update our safeguarding training, which we've been able to do. That was really useful. Just one small thing, but makes a big difference when you're writing a bid. We usually do it collaboratively. 2 or 3 people are involved with it. And what other organisations do is enable you to circulate your draft application very quickly. When you've changed your draft, you can just circulate it to other people. City Bridge Foundation doesn't have that facility, so it's quite laborious to try and do it collaboratively. But apart from that, I think we're obviously very, very happy.
Thank you. It's really great to hear that you've had that. I'll come to you in a second, Nikki, that you've had that experience with us, and the idea of circulating a draft is definitely something that we can pass. I'll pass that feedback on. Before I come to you, Annie, Nikki, you just put your hand up. Do you want to add?
Yeah, there was just 2 things. It was really interesting. Just before Myanah said trust, I wrote trust with a big star next to it on my notes, actually, because I think there is something about do trust us. Like we're not going to misuse your funds, but there's something about the how much money you're given versus how much the expectation back is, and what the offset on that is, I think is really important. And then I think there's also something around being user-led. Like some charity, some foundations and some trusts are being really, really strict on what they mean as user-led, and I absolutely, we have our lived experience consultants, and we have our EDI subgroup and things like that, but we also work with a huge number of patients who are in prolonged disorders of consciousness, and often a lot of our users do not want to be on a board. And some of them don't even have capacity. So it's like, when you're saying 75% of your board have to be have neurological conditions, that's not realistic. If I'm being really, really blunt and really honest, that is not realistic. But we have carers, we have people with different disabilities, we have people that are connected to those with disabilities, we have carers, those types of things, and we've had very open conversations with some funders that have said, no, that's not good enough. And so I just think there's maybe some sort of advocacy work to be done in there. Maybe it's something that NCVO can maybe help with over the years or something, but I think there needs to be some clarity with funders about how challenging that actually is, and how realistic that is, and what really valuable charities they might be missing out on funding because they're being so strict with that. Must be 75% or 50%, so I just think there's something around what user-led means and how it's defined, and yes, I totally agree with Myanah. Do trust us. Light touch is really good, but also come and visit us, come and see what we do as well. But yeah, trust is a massive thing.
There's definitely something about proportionality in terms of the reporting burden. Yeah, I think the notoriously bad example that people always hold up is ESF funding, or what was European structural funding, which was like you needed a whole other post just to report on ESF funding because it was scrutinized down to the very last penny. So we're as City Bridge, we're always trying to get that balance right, and we acknowledge that we don't always get it right. And so it's your feedback. We do listen to organizations when you tell us we think the burden of reporting here is slightly too heavy. This is how the proportionality could feel better adjusted from our side. So always give us that feedback. You said lots of wonderful things about us, but always give us that feedback where we can improve. And then just on the user-led bit, and sorry, Lara, I'll come to you after, or sorry, Nassi, I've just jumped in, but just, yeah, that user-led bit is a really sticky one-to-one pick, because there's lots of organizations who do give that 75% criteria, but I've often said, as you have just now, Nikki, that doesn't account for instances where somebody may find it very difficult to advocate for themselves, may find it very difficult to serve in a board-like position. And so what do you do then? So yeah, I've definitely liked playing hard and fast by a certain quota in terms of representation to define user-led. But then how do we define user-led? Because there's got to be some sort of criteria. That's the tricky bit. Anyway, I'll stop there now.
Thanks, James. Lara, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of echo and agree with what Nikki's just said, but also to give sort of a good-ish example of a funder that came to us to say, could you look through the funding application, give us feedback before it goes out? And one of the things that he'd said was, we would like to see this number of people represented on the board. And one of the pieces of feedback I gave was, you're actually creating a kind of, if an organization is supporting people, let's say that they are, and when I say just, I don't mean just, but a women's organization, Women's Centre, it's relatively easy at that point to have representation on the board. But actually, from my experience with supporting victims of trafficking, people who have neurological disorders, this kind of thing, actually that becomes even harder, and you're putting additional barriers to organizations that already have additional barriers to supporting people and getting funding. And I think flipping this question on its head for funders is really interesting. Into the previous question about beneficiary input, and I think actually a lot of funders could do with designing their application forms in collaboration with small charities and with organisations, because actually at that point you will get a really good insight into what forms should be like and what they need to be like, and how they can be more accessible and how they can be used particularly by the small charity community. So I think for me it's like flipping it on its head, the last question of like, okay, well, how do we involve beneficiaries, but how do funders involve beneficiaries in the creation of their process?
Thank you. You're right. It's that two-way process. Everyone needs to be involved in it. I'm aware that we're cutting our Q&A time. But Annie, I'd love to hear from you. Is there anything you'd like to add to this?
I mean, I totally agree with what everybody else has said. And I mean, I don't know if City Bridge can talk to councils, but councils in particular, I mean, I've just gone for a 5,000 grant and they're asking for every single receipt. They're asking for the demographics of every person, and some of them don't want to give it. And I mean, it's just ridiculous the amount of information that's being asked. So that would be really, really helpful. I agree, City Bridge has been fantastic and really does listen. I'm also involved in local motion in my area in Enfield, where you're really looking into what people need, and the voiceless particularly. I suppose really, I don't know if this is for a funder, but certain things that would be really helpful outside of the actual grants and outside of the application forms is things like linking what we've found with service providers and policymakers, linking our insights to bigger organisations, because we can't do that. I know a lot of training is offered, but it is like Nikki was saying, it's quite hard to attend training if there's just a few of you working on everything. But it's good, so keep that going. And when you do give us ideas about other funding that might be relevant, that's really helpful, because it takes ages to research relevant funders. This is just a little thing. Maybe it's nothing to do with you guys, but something that we find, because we don't have a base, is when we need space, it's really hard to get space to run our sessions, and it costs so much. And it takes half your project money seems to be spent on that. So whether you can point us to it, or maybe kind of, I don't know, even fund a space which then gives small groups access to it. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh yeah, and just raising the profile of helping us to raise the profile of our work. That's it.
Thank you. I've written a really long list, and I'm going to pass it over to James, because I think he's got something to add.
Yeah, I don't want to Annie, that's really interesting. This is all not quite music to my ears, because you're outlining problems here, wanting to share your insights wider, wanting to find space. So music to my ears isn't quite the right phrase, but it is all stuff that we think about quite a lot at City Bridge. There is the question around, what is our voice as an organization, and how do we help to amplify the voices of the organizations that we're working with? And this is a really live conversation at City Bridge right now. And the other thing around space, I mean, yeah, space in London comes at a premium, right? It's really hard. It eats up so much project budget to hire spaces. Again, something we're really live to, something we're working on at the moment. Keep feeding that back to us, because it strengthens our hand when we're thinking about what we can do as a foundation in terms of offering space. You know, there are other funders out there who do offer space, who have access to either low cost or completely free space for some of their funded organizations to use. So keep feeding this back to us, because it strengthens our hand when we're talking about what we want to do at City Bridge in this space.
Thank you, James. Okay, so we've got about 10 or so minutes for questions. Sorry, the Q&A time has been